Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 12th meeting of 2025 of the Economy and Fair Work Committee. Our first item of business is the third of a series of evidence sessions on the skills delivery landscape. The purpose of these sessions is to consider how the current skills system is working, identify the actions needed to support businesses and to improve the skills supply chain, including green skills. I'm delighted to welcome our panel this morning. First of all, Tony Burns, Chief Operating Officer of ACS Clothing, Jennifer Davis, Strategic Workforce Manager of Scottish Power Energy Networks, Doug Duguid, Chief Executive of Aurora Energy Services, and Stevie Wilson, Global Apprenticeship Manager of the SCORE Group. As always, I'll appeal to members to keep their questions as short as possible. I'm sure I will fail miserably in that request, but also to our witnesses to keep answers as concise as they possibly can do. Can I kick off with the first question on apprenticeships? I appreciate that apprenticeships are not the only part of the skills system, but it's certainly something that the committee have focused on quite heavily in recent weeks in our sessions. Can I just ask members of the panel what your current view is on the apprenticeship system in Scotland, maybe in comparison to the rest of the UK? What engagement have you had in the system, and just your general views on the apprenticeship system as it currently stands? I don't know if anybody wishes to kick off with that. I'll maybe bring in, I don't know, maybe Stevie, do you want to kick off? Given your role includes that word, maybe you want to kick off.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, folks. Stevie Wilson, SCORE's Global Apprenticeship Manager. The apprenticeship offering within SCORE Group stretches across the globe, really. But within Scotland, we use the Foundation Apprenticeship to support schools, the Modern Apprenticeship throughout the operation in Cowdenbeath and in Peterhead sites. And we use graduate apprenticeships as well. So we're used to and familiar with the current offering given by Scottish Government. Our experience in our English sites is that the apprenticeship is funded at a higher level. So I think roughly about £27,000 for an engineering apprentice, for example, compared to just over 10 for a Scottish apprentice. So we have to probably support, as a company, more financial investment within the Scottish apprenticeships. So that balance may be something you want to look at if you want to encourage more people to do STEM-type careers. But across the globe, we've got a site in Holland, for example, the apprenticeships in Holland. What they do is they go to a technical school after what we would call primary school, and they go in for 4 years in a technical school, or they go to an academic school. And that model allows the Dutch people to train people in skills. I was through one of their technical schools recently, and what they've got in there is 11, 12, 13-year-old pupils working on joinery, construction, motor vehicle manufacturing, electrical installation, pipe work and things, which is really remarkable to see that amount of people, that volume is a miss, I think, in Scotland.
That's really helpful. Just on, so you've got the experience of foundation, graduate and modern apprenticeships, I suppose the full complement of what's currently available. Is there any gaps that you identify within what effectively is a focus in Scotland on the different apprenticeship types?
What I guess is missing, there's a few, one or two small gaps. Non-destructive examination, we've worked with SDS to try and get something up and running. Industrial painting and coating would be an example of something you can get painting and decorating, but you can't get industrial painting and coating. So there's one or two gaps in my experience. But the biggest gap maybe is, the upskilling of adults into the, sector. If you're not within the 16 to 19 and maybe a little bit older bracket, then you'll find it difficult to come into an apprenticeship. So that's something I think, certainly we as a company, and I've spoken to some of the others, we're seeing that we have to heavily invest to allow these people to come in. And we call them trainees rather than apprentices because they follow a different plan. But none of that's funded. Mm-hmm. So it's something the skills gap is evident to us, and we do everything we can to try and fill that gap. And we fill it largely through apprenticeships. But, there's a growing number of people that have to come in as adult learners and do traineeships, which are not funded at all.
Okay. That's very helpful. Do you want to come in, Daniel?
Can I ask a brief supplementary, and thank the community for letting me in? I wonder if I could just break that apart a little bit. And I'll explain why. I spoke to a decorator apprentice just a few weeks ago who'd started when he was 30. And I think, so partly there's a structural problem there, which I think you're alluding to, both I think in terms of funding, but also I think the format of learning. But he was also saying that actually one of the issues he found was cultural, in that everyone treats the apprentices as young lads, and he wasn't a young lad. And so I just wondered, would you agree that there is actually multiple strands, not just the structure, but there's also kind of the format of the learning and maybe some cultural elements, or are there any other strands to that reskilling challenge? Because I think it is a really important one, and then we pull apart all the details of what that would look like.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with what you said. From my experience, we've got graduate apprenticeship, for example, is not capped in terms of age. So we've got a graduate apprentice that's 35 years old. It's come straight into our business, and he's training through the graduate apprenticeship, doing an engineering degree with Robert Gordon's. So that cultural issue is less prevalent in the graduate apprenticeship schemes. But I accept your point. If you go into a first-year apprenticeship in mechanical engineering, you're going to off the job for a year, and you'll be working in a training environment with 16 to 19-year-olds. So that, you know, there's an aspect of that which is important to recognise.
And are there any other structural elements that you think we need to sort of format types, or what the sort of the breakdown of the problem in terms of addressing the reskilling issue?
So it's how to support older people. We'll say older people, but you know we're speaking about 25 plus maybe, in an environment where it's prevalent that are 16, 17, 18-year-olds in that environment.
Yeah.
And we do a bit of work on that in SCORE. And we've got a range, I would say, up to 25, 26 in our modern apprenticeship. It starts. Again, the funding drops off with some of that. So structurally, that would be important to try and do something with that. There was a review done recently where they were looking at whether that off-the-job first year can be done on the job. And we would suggest that's entirely the wrong direction, because a lot of these young people are coming with less preparedness now than ever. And we need that first year off the job for them to be able to learn by making mistakes. And if they scrap a bit of material, it's just a wee bit of material, you can get another bit and try again, compared to working on a £85,000 client bit of a kit. And if you make a mistake with that, then obviously that's more commercially damaging, right? And from a health and safety standpoint, getting that skills off the job is really important to us.
Same question for the rest of the panel. Tony, you want to come in at this point yet?
Yeah, a little bit of background first of all. ACS, we're a business and we enable circular business models in the fashion industry. Ones like clothing rental. People can relate to renting a kilt for a function, for a black tie event or a wedding. That's been the backbone of the business for many years, but we rent everything now from ladies' wear, ski wear, kids wear, Gore-Tex clothing, tents, wetsuits, and we resell clothing, we repair clothing. We employ 125 people out at Eurocentral. When I joined ACS 20 years ago, there was a steady stream of talented, trained individuals used to walk through the door. We could cherry-pick the best people. Over the years, for a variety of socio-economic reasons, that pipeline has dried up. Brexit exacerbated it. And what we have done and how we engage with apprenticeship programmes is we've had to create our own talent pipeline. So if we can get the right people in the door, we then offer foundation, modern apprenticeships and graduate apprenticeships. And we had to set up our own SQA centre in-house, which underpins our apprenticeship programme, to allow us to do this. If we hadn't engaged with the apprenticeship programme, we probably wouldn't be here today. The other bit of it is, how do you get people in to actually become apprentices? So if you look at the previous routes, like agencies, employment agencies, that doesn't work anymore. You get poor fill rate, and the people that come in, really, they don't last long. So we've looked at a disadvantaged workforce where we recruit ex-offenders, current offenders, refugees, staff with disabilities, staff with long-term care background, and we get people in the door and we can invest in them via structured programmes where we're offering internationally recognised qualifications, and it allows us to mitigate the challenges of the job market.
So it sounds to me you do a lot of this effectively in-house, so you don't use an agency. It sounds like you do all the training in-house as well. Is that correct? Or is there a partnership at all with colleges, or is it all done kind of in-house?
Most of it we do in-house. We do it in-house where we can. And part of the reason is the training that's required for textile care, for example, it doesn't really exist out in the sort of further higher education market, because you're trying to teach people about quality control, about garments, about cleaning, about repair. It's an industry which is growing because we need to realise net zero, and the textile industry has such a damaging impact on the planet in terms of waste. But that type of skill in terms of reuse and repair, it's needed in all sorts of industries. It's not just textiles and garments. If we're going to realise net zero as a country, as globally, we're going to need to repair and reuse many things. So what we are doing needs to be done in other industries also.
So, can I bring in Kevin Stewart with a supplementary?
Thank you very much, Convener. And I think that's a very interesting story, Mr Burns. And one of the things that we've talked about previously is starting young people off in a jobs journey, and often that begins in school. And you're saying there that some of the skills around about textiles are not out there. I've been quite interested in speaking to a couple of constituents lately around about work they've been doing in terms of textiles and reuse and repair in schools, which when I was a young loon, we used to get those kind of things at school. It seems no more. Do we need to do more at school level to try and boost the kind of skills that you and your company are looking for?
Absolutely, and probably what you're referring to is things like home ec, where you to be sewing. So that needs to be. We've engaged with schools on a big basis, where 500 school kids came round our facility for tours at COP26, where we tried to teach them about how they should engage with fashion, move away from the throwaway culture into a respect for clothing, how you repair it, how you actually extend the life cycle of it. That's what we're trying to do, but what we're trying to do is also change culture, and starts with kids, and it starts at school, and the skills required to extend the life cycle of clothing and other items is required starting at a very young age.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
Tony, can I just, is there any changes you would wish to see within the apprenticeship system as it currently stands?
Well, we train people and put them through apprenticeship programmes because it's the right thing to do and we need that skill. But similar to the point made there, was, we get 10% of what organisations like us south of the border get. So it would be nice to get more funds to support the apprenticeship programme. But more importantly is apprenticeship programmes need to be promoted. They need to be given at least parity with other forms of further and higher education and respected, and they need to be employer-led.
That's very helpful. So, same question to Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I work for SP Engine Networks, and my role is to look after our over 500 trainees within the organisation, and that ranges from graduate programmes to apprenticeships to career transition programmes, similar to what Stevie talked about retraining or upskilling or reskilling skilled workers, and we also do pre-apprenticeship programmes. Our pre-employment programmes. Our apprenticeships are about 45% of the programmes that we do, and they're absolutely crucial for our industry. We have to grow our own talent. There is no other way for us to source those skills than growing it ourselves. So apprenticeships are absolutely the backbone of our organisation. In terms of schools and attractions in schools, yes, I do believe that more should be done within schools to raise awareness of the careers there. I talked about how we do have a lot of trainees, but that's within SPN's networks. When we look wider at our supply chain, I think there needs to be more done there in terms of developing the apprenticeship schemes and training programmes to support our industry going forward. There was a report done by EU Skills over a year ago. I think on average they said it was about 4% of trainees within organisations are trainees. And if you compare that with their 12%, there is a shortage there. And we tend to get into situations where, our staff could potentially be leaving to contractors or supply chain. And we can't be in that position. We need to work together in order to grow the apprenticeships, in order to be able to meet the demand, our future demand that there is.
I think, Gordon, do you want a supplementary?
Question. You said, Jennifer, that you have to grow your own talent.
Yep.
The Employer Skills Survey from 2014 showed that only 14% of employers took on apprenticeships. And by 2022 that had only grown to 16%. So what has to change in order to encourage more employers to grow their own talent, as your company and other companies are doing? And what are the benefits of having apprentices?
So more needs to be done on awareness of apprenticeships and easier access to apprenticeships, and absolutely funding comes into that as well. For small businesses, for our supply chain businesses, it has to be easier to access apprenticeships and understand what's there. It needs to be quicker in terms of developing and designing apprenticeships. I think at this point in time it's about 18 months from start to finish to design and develop an apprenticeship. We're in a situation where we're looking for skills in the next, or growth within the next 4 or 5 years. That needs to be quicker, absolutely. But raising that awareness and working across businesses and the value of apprenticeships. So that then brings me on to the value of apprenticeships. We have the full scale of foundation, modern and graduate apprenticeships. And they are employees within our organisation. They contribute back to the economy. They are paid, good wages within our organisation. So there's huge benefits. But the benefits that the organisation receives is that we also have a productive member of staff round about from that sort of 6-month point onwards. And they really are, delivering back for the business and delivering a role. If you took our graduate apprenticeships, for example, they're fantastic opportunities in new skill sets that we're developing, such as data, digitalisation. And the benefit there is that they are bringing that learnings from universities back into the workforce and rippling that learning through our teams. Absolute benefit there.
Okay.
Can I just ask around, you're obviously, you're able to do a lot of this at scale because you're obviously a significant employer in the Scottish economy. And I'm very familiar with some of the work you do around in Dumfries and Galloway in terms of the partnership with colleges around wind turbine technicians and various things. Are you, because of the scale of what you're able to do you have a lot of partnerships with colleges across Scotland? Are they effectively, I suppose the question is, are they responsive to what your skills gap and skill needs are as an employer?
So we do have good partnerships with colleges. They are flexible and adaptable to our needs. They do listen to us and work with us where we need to adapt them. I know they're in a situation where they are slightly struggling themselves, and where we can support, we will. Whether that is expanding our training, because we are expanding the number of trainees that we're bringing in. But yeah, they have been adaptable with us in that support.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And Duke, same question to yourself.
Just as a little bit of background, I'm the CEO and the founder of Aurora Energy Services. It's quite a young business, it's 3 years old. We've acquired 6 businesses over that period, all funded by our own equity. We're headquartered in Inverness. We have bases in Huntly, Aberdeen and Wick. And internationally, we're in the US, Australia and in Chile. And we're predominantly a wind services business, so 60% of our business is that, and the balance is oil and gas. So we're truly in the middle of the transition. My own history is that I started my career as a mechanical engineer and apprentice a long time back, obviously, but I have a very strong commitment to that aspect in terms of getting people into the business. So we have all types of apprentices and graduate trainees in our organisation, and we built our own training centre in Inverness, which is GWO approved. So it's a predominantly for wind industry, but also does ECITB training. We work with some of the colleges. I would say it's not always as flexible a response as we might want, particularly for adult retrainees. Apprentices, there's a well-trodden path. I think the colleges understand that. So we work with UHI in Inverness and also with North East College in Fraserburgh. So our apprentices for Huntly go to Fraserburgh. And, you know, there's some issues around logistics in terms of getting people to those locations as well. But I would say that the colleges are pretty constrained in terms of the numbers of people they can take. So as an example, we wanted 8 apprenticeship places at Fraserburgh last year and we got 2. So, you know, that means that there's a lot of people who have not been able to take up apprenticeships. If you look at the overall numbers, I think it's 25,000 places in Scotland with a demand of 40,000. And somehow that 15,000 needs to be picked up into other ways of getting into the workforce and pre-apprenticeship type work experience. So I think there are some structural challenges and there are definitely some funding challenges. Our apprentices are all employees, they're funded by us. The training centre that we built in Inverness was funded. We got 10% of the cost from HIE and we do 2,000 courses a year. But we're not, that training centre is not integrated with the colleges. And that's something I think it needs to be worked on, is to get that collaboration and interface working better.
That's really helpful. Doug, I'm going to bring in Murdo Fraser, and Murdo wants to follow up on some of the issues around apprenticeships and funding.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning to the panel. One issue we're interested in looking in as a committee is how the apprenticeship landscape in Scotland differs from elsewhere in the UK. And both yourself, Tony, and you, Steve, you kind of alluded to this earlier on. And so I'm interested in getting any views from any of you who operate in places other than Scotland. What are the differences? Both Tony and Stevie, I think you mentioned funding as being a difference. And certainly when the committee did a visit to Lothian buses, they were talking about how the funding for apprentices in Scotland was substantially lower than it was down south, but interested to get your perspective on that. And also on the broader issue of the apprenticeship levy, which we know is paid right across the UK, but is handled differently in Scotland compared to England. So I don't know, Stevie, if you want to kick off with any thoughts. Thank you.
I'll start with the apprenticeship levy. That I see for our English sites a levy account through HMIE, and then I can assign apprenticeships through that and draw funding down through that system. And it's almost a gift that keeps giving, because if I overspend on my apprenticeship levy, I only have to supplement 5% of the difference. So I can overspend by 20,000 for an apprentice, but only pay 5% of that. So it's heavily supported in that regard, and it allows companies that use the apprenticeship system to maximise their, benefit of that system. So that's, on the levy side of things. And in the Scottish system, there was the flexible workforce offering, which I think was capped at about 15,000 or something. So for a company the size of Score, it was not very much benefit at all, for the scale of the operation we've got. So yeah, there's differences with how that works. I was challenged to go and find out why in Scotland colleges seem to shy away from engineering places, like what you were suggesting, but in England they welcome them. And there was obviously a fundamental strategy difference or structural difference. And when I went and investigated that, what it appeared to be was a college in England has got a sum of money they need to spend on apprenticeships. But in Scotland, the colleges get an assigned number of apprentices they need to fill, apprentice places. So if your target is to fill apprenticeship places, you can get one-year apprenticeships in a lifeguard, for example, at a local pool, which are easily delivered, potentially, compared to running a 4 or 5 year apprenticeship in engineering, which is a more challenging delivery. So the emphasis on numbers might be unhelpful in terms of encouraging more challenging apprenticeship routes to be supported by colleges, because they just get the one. You get one whether it's a 4-year route or a 1-year route. So, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That's helpful. Tony, yeah.
So, thank you. We don't actually have any sites in England. However, we have tapped into the Flexible Workforce Development Fund in the past as an SME, turning over 10 million. 5k to us for the Flexible Workforce Development Fund was really key. We used it and it was put to good use. and it's a shame we don't have it anymore. What I would say, working with organisations south of the border, we have worked with our lead body for the Fashion and Textile Association, UKFT, to design training and development for apprenticeship programmes, which is used across the UK, but we've had to design it in conjunction with them for our needs in Scotland. And one of the challenges we've had doing lots of things in-house, we are audited by so many different bodies in Scotland about how we do things, and it doesn't add much value to us. I understand why it needs done, but it's a lot of time and effort. In addition to, we don't get much funds, but we need to deliver these programmes, the right thing to do, but we get audited by so many different bodies, which is a challenge.
Sure. But Tony, you said you didn't know whether that related to companies elsewhere in the UK because you don't have experience of that.
I believe we're audited more because we have UK-wide auditing, then we've got Scotland-specific programmes, so it's quite heavy.
Right. Okay. Jennifer, I don't know if you've experienced delivering apprentices elsewhere in the UK.
I'm fortunate being from a larger organisation that our models for apprenticeships run similar in Scotland to in our England and Wales licence areas as well. The only difference is really in the levy that it could be better in Scotland in terms of the transparency and how that funding is distributed. But our models run similarly. We have built good relationships with colleges in order to deliver that. We have our own training centres as well where we deliver it. So where we deliver training for apprenticeships. So it is a complete partnership across the board there.
And I mean, we had a moment ago about some of the issues with colleges in Scotland. What's your experience of dealing with colleges in Scotland?
I find that we've built the relationship with them. I think that's absolutely key, that we need to be clear on what our needs are and have those discussions early on. And if things aren't working or we need to change, then it's all about having those conversations, and they are adaptable to that. Again, that's perhaps that I'm a larger employer and able to do more influence in that sense. But we have good collaboration with our colleges in England.
Okay, thank you. Doug, do you want to?
I mean, we have just opened a facility in Teesside, and we don't have any apprentices there yet. But as Stevie said, the funding is different and is significantly higher. The other thing down there is that in terms of adult reskilling, everything we do in Scotland in that regard, we have to fund ourselves. In England, there's a Green Skills Passport, for example, and that goes to the individual, and it's between £2,000 and £2,500 to that individual to reskill, to go into green, renewable industries. So there's none of that in Scotland currently. And, that's quite a big challenge in terms of there are a lot of people who are mid to late 20s, early 30s who have either gone into other industries, retail or hospitality, but want to reskill into a more technically oriented job. And I think it's worth understanding that those jobs, when they're fully skilled, the salary levels, so all our kind of craft guys and technicians, their basic salary is 38,000, and they're, go up from there. So I think in terms of growing the economy and all the aspirations that we have as a country, getting those adults reskilled and into these higher tech jobs I think is crucial. And if you look at the skill shortage is acute and becoming more so. And in the Highlands where we're headquartered, there are thousands of jobs coming, long-term manufacturing-based jobs. And the scale of that demand is not being addressed by what we're doing currently. So we work with Aventus at RDC, the owners of RDC. We're putting together a programme for float and wind hull assembly with HHI from Korea, with Minyang for China. They're talking about 2,200 people by the end of the decade, starting in the second half of 2027. I was chatting with Stevie before we came in. Where are those people going to come from? And we need to be trying to address some of that more quickly than we are currently.
Yeah. And just on that point, every year we have a cohort of young people leaving school. Do you think enough is being done to signpost young people at that stage in their lives towards the career opportunities in the future economy?
Well, no, I don't. I think, you know, I look at my own experience. So in the late 70s and early 80s, many people were encouraged to go into trades and vocational type technical training. And in the intervening 40-odd years, there's been a bias towards university. I see it with my own children. And that still prevails. You know, my youngest is 18. He's just come out of school. The whole time he was told, uni's the answer, uni's the answer, which, you know, and again, we chatted about this beforehand. We need to, it's a cultural thing. And one of my concerns about SDS funding going to the Scottish Council is, will that bias continue? You know, because I would like to see more emphasis on adult retraining and apprentices, because those create highly skilled jobs that are permanent and long term.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, very interesting. Thank you.
Can I bring in Kevin Stewart just for a supplementary on
I want to go back a little bit, Convener, and, you know, Doug has just said, you know, try to find 2,200 people before the end of the decade is going to be challenging. I was recently at a company called Nexos in Aberdeen to talk to apprentices there. Some of them coming from Aberdeenshire, some of them from Angus. Often difficulties in terms of transport at various points. Now, you described folk travelling from Huntly to Fraserburgh for college. As a non-driver, that's a kind of difficult journey. It's all right for Stevie's base in Peterhead to go to the Broch, but not so easy to go for Huntly. How do you overcome some of those logistical difficulties, and do those kind of things actually put some young folk off of entering your apprenticeship schemes?
So, well, interestingly, we were also chatting about this because I'm originally from Turriff, and a number of people that work for Stevie's organisation come from there. And they're fortunate enough to have parents who are wealthy enough to be able to buy them cars and get them through driving tests and pay for the fuel. But a lot of kids in Huntly, for example, don't have that opportunity. Before I ran Aurora, I ran a large business called Enermec, which I sold in 2020, and it had 4,000 people, 1,100 of them in Scotland. And we actually laid on the transport ourselves to Fraserburgh from Aberdeen because we got better training in the Broch, actually. And we're doing that again from Huntly. So we're funding that, but there are many organisations, smaller organisations than us, that cannot afford that. Is it a deterrent? I think it is up to a point. Not so much in Inverness, because the colleges and UHI and our own training centre are in Inverness. But if you live in Wick or Alness, or, you know, it's a long trek to the college in Inverness every day, particularly for the first year, which is usually off-the-job training. So I think it is a deterrent up to a point. But I think a bigger deterrent is not promoting that career path at school. When I was in Enermec, we were based in Northfield, and we used to go to Northfield Academy, you know, 3 or 4 times a year and talk. And we took a lot of kids, gave them work experience, and we had 35 apprentices every year, and they came from that background. But then we were on the doorstep, and we bussed them to Fraserburgh for their college. So, you know, I do think it's a deterrent, but a deterrent is not promoting that path into the workforce.
Thank you, Convener.
Can I just add a little bit on that? Yeah, just on the transport issue, we've got, as Doug suggested, we've got people from Turriff, Banff, Macduff area, and the issue I've got personally with that is we can attract people for those sort of remote villages in Aberdeenshire into Peterhead, but without the free bus availability, which is not for these towns into Peterhead, you're only attracting people from an affluent postcode. What you're not doing is working with the talent that exists in some of the more deprived areas that we need, in my view, as a community of people to try and get those people leveraged into good careers and into a healthy place from a career and economical standpoint. So,
clarify what you're saying there, Stevie, because obviously the free bus travel is there for those up to age 22, but are you saying that some of those buses for Banff Macduff, it's not so easy to get?
Well, there's no buses from Turriff or from Banff to Peterhead.
Okay.
So the lack of transport is the issue there. Okay. Because there's no bus, even Newport Sligo, which is a 20-minute drive from Peterhead, there's no transport from Newport Sligo into Peterhead and home again in the evening.
And how long has that been the case that there's not been a service there? Because I can remember going to Newport Sligo to
20+ years.
Okay.
So
I'm maybe showing my age now, Steve.
Yeah. Me too. I know the feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
That was a while ago then. Sorry, I'll bring in Tony, sorry.
Just one quick point, something we're trying to do to mitigate the challenges for young people. If young people come to work on the bus or sustainably walk, cycle, run, we're giving them a free lunch. So if you come to work sustainably, you get a free lunch, and it also helps the challenges with some young people who maybe don't have money for lunch, but they get free bus travel, and at the same time it also tackles our Scope 3 emissions, because our biggest Scope 3 emission is our staff commute. So it's a win-win.
I'm going to bring in Jamie Halco-Johnson just as a supplementary on that.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm very glad that this came up, because I visited Sarah Max as part of Apprenticeship Week, and this is exactly the issue that they were talking about, the lack of transport. And of course buses don't always run. Even if there is a bus, it doesn't always run the timings young folk need to get into the apprenticeship. One of the other issues that was raised there, and is a particular concern in a lot of rural areas where there's limited choice, is the lack of accommodation, housing and the like. And I know that's something that has come up. But just wondering how it kind of impacts on you. Obviously it's perhaps easier when folk are living at home, but certainly if we're looking at 2,000 jobs in our kind of area, and all competing with other jobs as well, we simply just don't have the accommodation to be able to accommodate a lot of these people. So I was just wondering what thoughts were on that.
I think it's a significant challenge if you look at the Highland area, whether it's along the Moray coast or on the other side of the Firth. And we as a company are part of the Highlands and Islands integrated attempt to try and address some of that. There's also a lot of construction jobs for SSEN. We work on part of that. And there are people building camps, as you will know, for significant numbers of foreign workers as well. None of that is easily solved, but we're going to have to relocate people to the Highlands because the population simply does not allow for that level of growth. I would say that if you look at places like Port Talbot in Wales, where there's been 3,000 redundancies recently, a lot of people with technical skills that could be retrained to address some of these jobs. Similarly at Grangemouth, but I agree with Stevie. I think there are other deprived areas in Scotland particularly that we're not picking up those people and giving them encouragement to relocate, because the jobs that are coming are not project or construction related. These are long-term manufacturing jobs with high skill levels, and you would want those people to relocate and actually live in the community. So, I think, frankly, that's a problem for government to address, not industry, but it is a real restriction in getting people to relocate. Yeah. The Highlands is a wonderful place to live. Two of my 5 kids have moved there, so I think and I don't think we do enough to promote that. And I don't hear a lot of discussion about these jobs are coming and they're not far away, and I don't hear a lot of positive promotion of that, frankly.
Yeah. The timescales, the timelines that we're talking about, and particularly say with the Freeport, just don't seem to add up in terms of what we need, when we need it, and actually what we're going to be able to deliver. Did you want to come in, Jennifer?
Yeah, it was to say more on the actual data of the amount of roles that are needed and the resources that are required. I think there is more work required there to understand that full issue. I agree with Doug that all those new roles aren't necessarily just going to be new people that are involved in that. We're very much on that reskilling, upskilling, those opportunities there. You touched on Grangemouth. That's something that we're very interested in doing for our engineering and our craft roles, is taking that opportunity to reskill and upskill. And we can do that at a quicker pace than apprenticeships. So that is really important for us. We're also looking at ex-forces and bringing in ex-forces and being able to reskill and upskill those people as well, those personnel into our. So it's not necessarily about new people that we're looking to bring in. It is about that, what's existing and how can we support other industries.
Does anybody else want to come in, Stevie? Do you want to come in? Or?
I guess on the accommodation piece, if you fast forward to a place where if you had a pocket and there was an available, like a Unite accommodation block or some description supported by the government, then it does allow people in that early part of their apprenticeship or career to get supported accommodation during their early training period. So that doesn't exist at the moment. So whether that's an option or not to consider.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Gordon, do you want to come in with a supplementary on this?
It was actually to a point that Doug raised earlier on about we need to do more to promote apprenticeships in schools, which I 100% agree with. But what I was wondering was, what do you think the role of employers is in doing that? I'm aware of an example in my own constituency where the national roofing contractors have agreed that a new NAT5 course will start after the summer to introduce young people into traditional roofing skills, to give them an interest in possibly taking an apprenticeship roofing career when they leave school. And that's being run by a local company called Compass Roofing. So I was just wondering, you know, I agree that we need to put more young people through the apprenticeship route rather than university. And I'm as guilty as you are because my two sons went to university. But what is the role of employers in that encouragement of going down the apprenticeship route?
I mean, I think it's a fundamental commitment that all businesses that are looking for apprentices should have. So, you know, Aurora is a relatively new business, but in my previous business, Intermec, I used to go to Northfield Academy myself as the CEO of that business because my history was that I came up off the tools, did an apprenticeship. I have a very solid belief in that. And one of my 5 kids did do an apprenticeship, so one of them escaped going to uni. But, you know, I think it is a fundamental responsibility of business, but it's not particularly encouraged. We were very fortunate in Northfield where we had a deputy head who wanted us to come and to talk to the kids. And one of the things that I would say about that is that we should start much earlier, because oftentimes they've already made their choices by the time these kind of opportunities are presented to them. You know, it's in late primary school that STEM type courses should be promoted. And we used to, in Intermec, and we're going to do this again in Aurora because we have our own training centre, and we have had some of the Inverness schools round our training centre. And basically it was to try and open up their minds to what the possibilities are, because there's such a wide range of engineering opportunities. But you do need the school to engage with you, to allow you access and to be able to present. And what we used to do was we used to get our apprentices to do the tour around the workshops with the school kids, because they relate much more to them than they would do to somebody like me, for example. So, and that really did, you know, we had a good apprenticeship programme and had a great relationship with our local school, and we would like to do that again in Aurora. In the Highlands, it's more difficult because the schools are distributed over a much larger geographic area, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to make that happen.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Tony.
Just a quickie, we have developed a foundation apprenticeship, normally a 6-month process, but we worked with a lead body and we've compressed it into 3 weeks. So what it allows school leavers, school kids to do is come and engage with us for 3 weeks, go through it, have a flavour for everything relative to textile care, and if they like it, then hey, potentially there's a job here longer term. But a full 6-month process, they won't endure that. So 3 weeks, and it's fit for purpose in terms of school kids or school leavers.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, Steve.
At SCORE, our engagement with schools is really important. We've got about 36 STEM ambassadors based in Peterhead, and they work through a range of primary schools and secondary schools within the catchment area that we work in. We get involved with career days, we get involved with tours, inviting kids in for certain topics if they're studying a certain, you know, to contextualise the learning, get them in and see part of the operation that they might be studying around. We also are involved in work experience, which for Aberdeenshire, and maybe across Scotland, I'm not sure of the rest, but you know, we've stepped away since COVID from mandated work experience in S3, that all primary, secondary kids would have got work experience. It's now focused around foundation apprenticeships, which is a step change. And our response as a company to that is to offer 3 work experience opportunities per year. 1 in the first 3 days of the October break, 1 in the 3 days February midterm, and 1 in 3 days in the April break. And that allows it to happen without impacting on the student's journey, whether at college or at school. So we've the work experience portion and letting people see your business, as you've suggested, going in for a 3-day or a year and 3-week experience is one of the only mechanisms I can see that allows young people to see the industry they might be walking into, and it gives them an almost try before you buy option, which is really important because young people need confidence in their decision making. They're not going to read your website and start an apprenticeship. They want to get some experience in it to give them confidence this is the right thing for them, and that's just as important to the company as for the young person.
And how many companies go down that route, either at ACS or SCORE?
Young people, you mean, our company?
Yeah, encouraging young people to come in and engage and understand the business and, you know, think about a career in your area. Is there a lot of companies doing that, or are you an exception?
Yeah, at Peterhead Academy, for example, it's, you know, our local academy. They've got a good range of companies working now with them through the DYW schemes. So DYW is prominent through this process, and it allows the connection between industry and the schools. And that mechanism is important, you know, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater if there's changes in that area, to ensure that that link from employers to schools works well, and giving credit and incentive to employers and schools to ensure that door remains open, even to a point where you're an influencing partner, I think is the phrase they use, where delivering actually in the classroom. So, yeah, and that includes maths, which is, you know, across Scotland we're struggling delivering maths and getting young people up to the standard of National 5 maths, for example, and equally in the technical subjects. You know, we're struggling across Scotland retaining and keeping technical teachers. Therefore, there's less opportunities for people to try engineering and then take a career in it. Without that sample try, people are not going to choose it as a career option. So that's detrimental to my skills gap as we see it.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Con. Can I bring in Kevin Stewart for a supplementary?
Thank you again, Convener. I'm interested in this relationships with schools aspect. And Doug, you pointed out the relationship with Northfield, and Northfield's not in my patch in Aberdeen, but I represented that area in the council for a number of years previously. The relationship that you mentioned was with a former deputy head teacher. Stevie, you talked about the relationship with Peterhead Academy. Obviously, people are important in terms of these relationships. Do you think that all schools should be mandated in one way, shape or form to actually engage more with businesses like you? You know, that open door policy, which you obviously had at Northfield, benefited everyone. Should there be a wee bit of mandation to those schools that are not doing what Northfield did in the past, or what Peterhead are doing at this moment? Stevie?
Yeah, well, I jump in. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. And I wonder if the way we measure schools at the moment, if a school is in a comfortable, in inverted commas, place on league tables, etc., on attainment, they maybe have less aspiration to do anything different. Where the schools, I feel, that are hungry for change and hungry for improvement are more unlikely to engage with us. And I think that if we mandate it across all schools, then clearly you're going to improve on that engagement piece, and therefore the careers that we as an industry wish to offer can be clearly signposted within each of the schools locally.
Doug, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the mandating of it. It would certainly give better access. I think we've found, and we've got this now in Huntly, and we're starting to get it in Inverness, is that the schools are engaging with us because there's some recognition that vocational apprenticeship type training is important. You know, that there is some willingness to allow that. I think what I would like to see is it to happen earlier, because if it's by the time they're in third year of secondary, it's very difficult to influence where they're headed. And to be fair, DYW does do. They were responsible for taking the kids to our training centre in Inverness, and they do good work in that area. I think there just could be a lot more of it, is how I would see it.
Jennifer, Tony, do you want to come in?
I think there's more that can be done in that early career, early education pathways. You know, like you suggested, the NAT 5, you know, at high school. I think that's something that needs to be explored more in order to give that taster of what industry is looking for and what that interest is. Maybe there's an opportunity there as well in an early education pathway to be able to fast track into a modern apprenticeship and help industry to produce those skills at a quicker rate. So I think there is a gap there. Maybe not necessarily mandate high schools or schools in order to engage with us, but to create the programmes for them in order to have that experience for learners.
Tony, please.
Yeah, I would agree that you know, if we could build something into curricula, and we've been trying to do this about education and sustainable fashion, about clothing repair, sewing, etc., would be ideal. We've been trying to engage with schools on many fronts, and we've had great successes. We've currently got a project in collaboration with the United Nations where we're taking multiple schools in the local area are taking one of the SDGs and looking at how they can relate that SDG to sustainable fashion to what we do at ACS. So that's one of the ways in which we can liaise with schools and start to embed sort of the right thoughts at a young age. And we've had great support from Education Scotland, and that's something the UN have said they haven't had the same impact in terms of south of the border.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks very much for that. Lots of mentions of Northfield Academy. I have to say that's where I did my very first teacher training placement. That wasn't yesterday, I have to say. Can I bring in Daniel Johnson's got a supplementary?
In a sense, I think this has been covered, but I am interested in this gap. I wonder if one of the issues we've got is that a foundation apprenticeship is a bit of a commitment, and work experience is no commitment at all. I wonder if we need to sort of have something that is in between, so both having a bit more structure to the work experience, maybe a degree of certification, but not this necessary to the same commitment as a full-time course for the whole of an academic year. Is that what we are sort of vaguely sort of reaching towards in terms of this discussion? And is something like, so in Manchester they have skills boot camps, you know, could we be looking at models like that where there's sort of more structured but shorter term opportunities for young people? I don't know if anyone on the panel wants to.
I think that would absolutely work, is having that opportunity for a shorter period to experience what the skills that the industry are looking for. From SPNG Networks, you know, we are looking for engineering skills, we're looking for craft, but we're also looking for data and commercial and skill sets that we're maybe not recognised for or not known for. So there's an opportunity there to raise awareness of what we actually are looking for our future growth roles.
Yeah, the pre-apprenticeship piece is important. It's, you know, talking about work pre-apprenticeship, you know, or career signposting. And what we can't ignore is that the college sector does a lot of work in this area. So the colleges, in my experience, if I've got a candidate that's presenting and maybe hasn't got the hand skills or the hand skill preparation through school, we may suggest to them, go to college for a year, do a bit of work and apply again next year. So the college can be used as a tool by industry and companies like ourselves to upskill and, you know, prepare people in a fashion that allows them maybe to present the year after and then take on a successful career in engineering. So there is a bit of work already existing through the college template.
And look, just and as an add-on, and this is a mild tangent, but I don't know where else I'll throw this question in. Do we also need to tease apart a little bit technical and vocational? I think sometimes we're just going, it's either academic or it's skills, and actually there is a difference between practical hands-on learning, but also then the applied theoretical, which is technical. And in other countries, they keep the three categories actually quite distinct. Is that something else we need to have a think about at school level, making sure that we are providing opportunities across the three areas, not just being binary between academic and skills? Stevie, you seem to be nodding.
So the ideal candidate for us in terms of an engineering apprenticeship, for example, would be they've got skills preparation, so they've had hand skills. When I'm talking about skills, I mean in technical hand skills preparation. They've also got academic preparation, and for us the gold standard would be National 5 Maths and science level, that type of thing. And then they've got behavioural preparation. And the 3 pillars for us is what we kind of measure candidates on. So it's that skills preparation piece. What have they done to prepare their skills and their hand skills technically? What have they done to prepare their academic profile, which is the knowledge base, right? And what have they done from a behavioural standpoint? How prepared are they for work? What maturity level? What examples have they got about, working for a club, playing an instrument, all that kind of commitment and focus and the soft, the meta skills type stuff.
So I find that really interesting because I think sometimes we treat skills as being an alternative to academic, and then what you've just described actually is just a different blend of academic relative to the other things that you should be learning in school. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, we need 3. We need all 3. Yeah. Even if it's a vocational route you're going into, but you need all 3.
I'll leave that there, but panels want to respond.
I mean, I think there are other locations internationally where you see that in the high school level, more preparation for that, and it's not, vocational or technical or academic, it's a blend. So if you look in Germany as an example, they start at 14 years old, almost streaming kids, if that's the right terminology, into vocational and technical, and they start much earlier into their apprenticeship as a consequence because they have some of those skills. And, I think traditionally here, if you look back 4 or 5 decades where we had apprenticeships running with day release, technical was done alongside vocational during that 4-year apprenticeship. That happens much less now, I would say, than used to be the case. And I think that is a restriction in terms of the range of opportunities that are available at the end of an apprenticeship. Because in the past, it was easier to move into an engineering role at the end of an apprenticeship, into maybe a design environment or whatever, because you had that technical training alongside the vocational.
I was going to come in about the pre-apprenticeship. So we offer pre-apprenticeship programmes within SPNG Networks, and that's a really good way of capturing high school students who haven't achieved the qualifications needed for a modern apprenticeship, and it gives them a 10-month period at a college that we work with, and they have a period of time where they come into our technical training centres, but it allows them to get experience, and we monitor their progress throughout that course, and then we look to involve them in our assessment centres for our actual modern apprenticeship once they've completed that. So it's another sort of entry point pathway into our modern apprenticeships, and it captures those students who haven't got those qualifications originally, but we recognise that they've put that work in and they've developed those skills in that 10-month period. It really does focus, when you don't get the grades that you need for an apprenticeship, it focuses them in, and they work hard to get their places within our actual programmes.
Really interesting.
Thanks very much, Adele. Can I bring in the Deputy Convener?
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Just picking up a point, I think you started this thread, Tony, when you were talking about underrepresented groups. I wondered in what ways you're able to, given your various industries, to target girls and women, and your reflections on the skills system for them, because if we're bringing in all the parts, I mean, obviously, some of your industries have tended to be more male-dominated. So I'd appreciate your thoughts and reflections on that. Thanks.
Well, without a doubt, some of the things like logistics is underrepresented. So we have gone out of our way to try and engage with underrepresented groups, a variety of them, and we've tried to balance what we do in terms of gender as well. So we've looked at that. We're a B Corp, and we're measured on many different levels, and gender pay gap, etc., etc. It's all really important to us. So we're actually measured on these things. So it's something we do. We make it's important to us.
Yeah, and I suppose, to be clear, I'm not kind of seeking to have a pop at any of you in terms of I'm more really trying to understand how you see the skills system as currently structured from your industry, how it positively encourages women or doesn't. So it's more about a generic kind of question rather than what good. Oh, I can see you want to come in, Stevie.
So just on that point, if you look at going into engineering class at college, to give them an idea of what opportunities you may have for the forthcoming year, most of that engineering class won't be female.
Mm-hmm.
You might have 1 in 10 potentially. If you go into a same setting in a P7 class and speak about engineering, you've got a 50-50 split. So the point of engagement that was mentioned by Doug is really important for us in a male-dominated engineering environment. And we use our female apprentices that are doing well in our apprenticeship to go into the school environment and talk about their story and role model what they're doing to create that soft space for young people to be impressioned that it's not a male-dominated environment. And if you're female or male, you can do well in this environment if you've got the right skill set. So it's just about messaging and doing that at the right point. So, you know, getting access to people. I'm going into college tomorrow to speak to business admin and HNC business management students. Most of them will be female. But, you know, we've got a group apprenticeship starting in the end of May, and that would be the target group for us recruiting it from those classes. So, you know, if you go in at that end, it's too late for us to have a lot of influence in terms of gender. But going in earlier is really important.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, and going in earlier at primary schools to raise awareness of the wide range of careers that are there. With SPNG Networks, we have about 14% of our trainees are female. That's about 13% in our apprenticeships, and it rises to 23% for our graduates. So there is more in that higher education females coming through. Yes, predominantly we are engineering and craft in terms of our trainee programmes. And we've made a huge increase. 5 years ago, we were sitting at 2% of females. So that has been a great increase, but there is so much more to be done on that. So yes, absolutely raising that awareness early on, having those positive role models within our organisation, you know, representing that at all levels throughout our organisation, you know, that females are in roles and important roles across the board. So yeah, it's something that needs to be addressed. It is something that needs to be tackled, not just early on in primary schools, but with influencers of children. So it is looking at parents to provide that support. You know, within our organisation, we do get lots of recommendations through our employee network to go into our apprenticeship programmes, and that's parents that are saying these are really good programmes. I want my child to, can we put them forward for those roles? They still go through our assessment centres, but more needs to be done with parents across Scotland to make them aware of these careers that are available.
And just carrying on, it's something that we've just not come up yet, but to what extent do you think that the views of industry are fairly reflected in terms of shaping policy and the provision of it? I mean, it's good that you're here this morning, but apart from that. Tony?
I sit on the ILG for fashion and textiles in Scotland, and we actually had a conversation just last week about that, yeah, it's great to share experiences about what we do, but we really, if we're going to have more impact, we need to share these experiences direct with policymakers and make sure that they are taking or listening to these things, to the challenges that we have that are preventing us from growing and making us a more profitable, wealthy, fairer, equitable society by actually growing these businesses.
And how about yourself, Jennifer? Because obviously I appreciate this is sometimes a function of scale.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, I do believe there needs to be more done in terms of making that connection with skills and what we're needing for future skills and tying that in with education. I think the two need to meet in for this. I'm part of I co-chair the Apprenticeship Approvals Group through SAB. That's a role I've recently taken. And employers' voice is extremely important at that in driving the skills that we need and approving the apprenticeships that we need across all sectors. So it is extremely important. Do we necessarily have a voice with policymakers? I agree with Tony. I think more needs to be done there in making that connection.
Okay. And I've got one more question, which I'll roll in, Doug, if you want to come in as well. We've kind of all mentioned this morning in terms of sort of rapid change driven by net zero, artificial intelligence as well. I'd appreciate just some last reflections on what flexibility points need to be built into the system going forward to allow us to be able to be poised and ready appreciate this is a massive area, but just some reflections. And Doug, if you perhaps wanted to pick up on the earlier point.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we sit as an organisation, we're truly an energy transition business because we have a chunk of oil and gas and a chunk of renewables. Does the policy reflect what the industry is looking for? To some extent it does. I think more could be done. I think one of the issues that I see is that the colleges and universities, their engagement with industry is not as good as it could be in terms of understanding what we need out at the end of those processes, and more flexibility, particularly in things like adult reskilling, because in this transition, you know, we're going to have a whole number of people who are going to transition from other industries into renewables and into net zero focused parts, a new industry effectively. And part of that, to address your earlier question about greater engagement of the female workforce, there is an opportunity, I think, in adult reskilling around things like renewables. If you look at things like the wind industry, blade repair, you know, that type of skill can be built incrementally. It doesn't have to be, and there needs to be the flexibility with the colleges so people can do work in industry and then go back and increase their skills. And that's quite difficult at the moment to get that, because the colleges are somewhat constrained in what they can deliver, you know, in terms of you have blocks of technical education to go alongside those practical skills.
Any final comments, Stevie, on my last question?
In terms of flex points, I guess the biggest take home for me is that while we can talk about meta skills and soft skills and things, the absolute core necessity for us this side and the next side of net zero is practical hand skills delivery. You know, training people with the ability to do things with their hands and with machines and with, you know, and embrace technology in that sense. And the big lack I see in terms of our skill shortage is stemming from the lack of supply of technical experiences and hand skills within schools and potentially colleges.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Michelle, can I bring in Willie Coffey?
Thanks very much, Convener, and good morning everybody. Really fascinating to hear some of this, and I wanted to explore a couple of issues in a wee bit more detail if I can. Firstly, the STEM issue and how we intervene at whatever earliest stage we can to direct youngsters into these professions and so on. And the other one about the relationship with the colleges that I've been picking up in discussion with our colleagues. Firstly, in STEM, I mean, I've had so many schools come to the Parliament over my parliamentary term, which is about 18 years now, and every time I get the opportunity, I ask the youngsters, how many of you are doing software development or engineering? No hands go up. And I'm mindful of what you said, Doug, that we need to intervene earlier, probably at the primary level, because when the kids go from primary into secondary, a lot of them, particularly younger females, will drop out of their interest in science and engineering and software development and so on. What's the secret to try to reverse that, do you think? And I was listening carefully to you, Stevie, and you're saying you regularly try to visit schools and colleges to bring the attention of the possibilities of careers in science and engineering to youngsters. So what do you think the magic ingredient is that we could share all around Scotland to try and affect and influence this?
You want me to go?
Go ahead, Stevie.
Yeah, thank you. The biggest issue I see in terms of recruiting and retaining technical teachers is the current requirement to have a degree to teach in Scotland. So that's a GTC requirement, is my understanding, and it's all there for the right reasons, practitioners and professional teachers, etc. But the core of delivery of technical hand skills is normally given best by people that have been in jobs and careers doing technical hand skills. And the population of those people is vast, and they may well wish to come into a secondary post and deliver that level of training to young people, but you then immediately cut the pack significantly by asking for a degree programme. So if we can do one of two things, one is run pilots or whatever to allow technical teachers to be delivered or gain experience in delivering training in schools, and two, find a mechanism through, say, graduate apprenticeship programme or something similar to allow people that take that vocation to get their degree in teaching and training as part of some kind of pilot. But I think if you can get people in front of young, get practitioners in front of young people delivering hand skills in schools, you'll go some way, because the demand's there. When they do subject choices in the local schools, they're taking 80 kids and filtering it down to 16 because we've only got one class for Nat 5 metalwork or whatever, right? So the demand's there for the young people, the delivery's not there.
Okay, that's fascinating. Is that happening elsewhere in Europe?
Yeah,
Perhaps?
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, I've got guys in my organisation who would happily go to the colleges and deliver practical courses, but they don't have the prerequisite to get into that environment. And that's partly what I was meaning about flexibility and working with the colleges. I've got guys with 40 years experience in Huntly who would happily go to Fraserburgh and teach welding, but they're not allowed to. And I would be happy to fund that, you know, at least part-time. That's what I mean by more flexibility with the college, because they're constrained by the policy and the regulation that they have to adhere to. But so that's one aspect. I think in terms of the schools, I mean, engineering's a fantastic career. If you can inspire people, you know, what we did in Intermec was we had quite a number of women engineers and project managers and apprentices, and we would send them out to the schools in late, you know, primary 6, primary 7, to deliver with enthusiasm the careers that they'd had, and that I think is more engaging. And maybe it's to Kevin's point, maybe it should be mandatory, I don't know, you know, but I think if SCDI used to have a young engineers club, which has kind of faded a bit, but again, a lot of companies, you know, supported that young engineers club, and I think that's again as a way of engaging kids much younger into all the, because engineering is such a wide range of careers, you know, but if you can get people who are enthusiastic about it to deliver that message, okay, I think it would inspire kids to make some of those choices if they understood that maths and science was a prerequisite to getting into those careers. Okay.
Jennifer, Tony, any views on the magic ingredient that we need
to
I
agree that we, as organisations, we're individually doing that and doing our STEM outreach and attending primary schools and high schools to raise STEM awareness and careers. Absolutely, we're doing that as an organisation, but that's individual organisations. We need something that's more structured and national, that's entering all schools in all areas to target it. It feels like we do it at our own level, and it needs something more national.
Is it working? Or is it not working as well as it could?
So, I mean, in terms of our applications that we get for our apprenticeships, it absolutely outstrips what we have in terms of the roles. And this year we had, for our graduate programme, we had over 9,000 applicants for our 100 graduate positions. For our apprenticeships, we had, I think it was roughly about 4,000 applications for the 140 apprenticeships that we have. So there is the demand is there. You know, we are getting successful candidates through our programmes, but again, it's back to that wider, what can we do with our supply chain to get them involved in apprenticeships as well and grow the support systems that are there for it.
Okay. Tony, any views on the magic ingredient we need to deploy here?
At schools, do the career advisors have enough visibility of what's available in terms of vocational and green jobs? That's a sort of first question. But what have we tried to do? We try and visit schools ourselves, but we can't do everything. So we use organisations like Developing Young Workforce, like Young Enterprise Scotland. We've worked with the Prince's Trust, the King's Foundation, and worked with them to use them as a vehicle to have more impact and actually help us with our message in terms of what's available in terms of jobs, but also what we're trying to do in terms of transition the fashion industry to a more sustainable place. And what we're doing fits well with all those organisations, their goals and ambitions, and what they are interested in speaking to schools about.
Okay, thank you. Fascinating again. Other questions about relationship with colleges again, and I've picked up a few comments that you've all made through the course of the discussion. Tony, you were saying you have to create your own talent pipeline. Jennifer, you said the same thing. We have to grow our own talent pipeline. There's no way to source it otherwise. Doug, you said your training centre isn't really completely integrated with the college. Forgive me if I've picked that up wrongly, but that's kind of telling me that you're not getting what you need from the college sector to be ready and available for your business or your industry and that you have to intervene significantly to get the talent and the skills shaped the way you want you need. Is that a fair reflection of what your view is of what's coming through the college sector to you, or is it different?
There's two aspects to that. But partly it's about volume. It's the number of people they can produce because of the budget constraints and the resource constraints that they have. So that's one aspect of it. There is an aspect of them delivering people at the end of that training course that have the right skill set. And some of that is changing because the nature of some of our industries are changing with the move to net zero and more renewables. I think that, you know, we, on the industry side, we could engage better with the colleges as well. You know, it's about us articulating what we need. If you look at our training centre in Inverness, we're doing a lot of safety related and basic technical training, which could feed in people into the technical colleges and to the universities. And that doesn't really happen at the moment. So I think it's maybe partly about communication. It's about, you know, just us engaging. And a point I would make is that depending on the scale of your organisation, you know, allows you to have, we're a reasonable size of an organisation and therefore have capacity to go and engage with the colleges up to that point. But there are a lot of much smaller businesses, if you look at SSEN's supply chain as an example, who don't have that capacity. It's really difficult for them to take on trainees and to engage with it. So that's an area I think it needs addressed. How does the funding get to those SMEs as opposed to bigger businesses like ourselves and SCOA?
Okay, thanks for that, Doug. Jennifer, you did say there's no way to source it otherwise. Could you just elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
So that's for like our craft apprenticeships, our jointers, overhead lines. That, you know, we can't recruit them direct from the market. We've tried, but there's no the supply of that from the direct market. So we have to train our own talent. We have to grow our own talent through apprenticeships and through like our adult programmes or our career transition programmes.
Possible to create those courses and skills at college or whatever?
So we work closely with the colleges for our apprenticeships. We do, I talk about we growing our own talent, but that is a partnership with our colleges. We work closely with Forth Valley for our craft apprenticeship. We've got Forth Valley that's a pillar to that. We have our own technical training school, which is a pillar. We have, you know, our workplace learning as well, where our trainees go out and shadow and develop skills, and then we support them from a workforce renewals team, and we provide the support. So it takes our 4 pillars to build that apprenticeship.
Okay, thanks. Tony, I was listening to your remarks. How do you said earlier in your opening remarks that people need to think differently about your industry, and rather than throwing away, to repurposing access rather than ownership, I've read in your website. So how do you get that kind of skill embedded in the people that work for you? Do you get it from the colleges or do you train that?
Well, we are creating our own talent pipeline, but we do work closely with multiple colleges and universities. New College Lancashire, City of Glasgow College, Glasgow Caledonian University, on student placements, on interns. We co-design some of the training that we're doing. However, we are in a relatively nascent industry, and it's probably, you know, colleges may be trying to catch up with some of these things. There are well-established, good training programmes for jobs that have been about for many years, but the type of thing that we're doing and the sort of net zero has been mentioned, and trying to realise that in the fashion industry, it's probably will lag a little bit behind in terms of where we need to be for that type of thing.
Okay, Stevie, maybe the last one for you. Are you getting the skills that you need coming through?
So the 2 colleges I deal with in Scotland, Fife College and North East Scotland College, both give a service to us that is more than is expected in terms of approach, engagement. You know, we get what we need from both colleges. They've got teams that are focused toward the business, so they'll look at us and engage with us in terms of individual apprentice progress, the talent pipeline for next year's apprentice intake. You know, so all of that for me works well in both college settings. The college also offer a vital service. I've mentioned this in terms of if someone just wants to leave school in the 4th year. And you know, I'm not doing a 5th year. I'm sick of calling somebody Mr. something, right? I want to go into a real-world environment. The college offer a massive help to us as a country, giving these young people the opportunity to go in and do a full-time programme in an area they have a notion they might want to take a career in. So they're not gambling on an apprentice commitment, but they're going into, say, engineering or textiles or IT. They go into that for a year, committing to a college programme. And that's essential for our young people in Scotland, in my belief, that we'll give them those opportunities to expand, try something. And if they don't like that, next year try a different course. So that ability to experience and try things as a full-time unemployed student is really important. And then at some point they'll go, I've found something I like, now I'm going to try and find a career in it. So giving our young people that space to do that is important. And the colleges do that for us. Okay. And we can't ignore that again.
Okay. Thank you very much for those answers. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Willie. A final question from myself. You'll be aware that we recently had the independent review of the skills landscape in Scotland. It was carried out by James Withers. I wonder if any of the panel have any reflections on that review. Is it the right direction of travel in terms of our skills landscape that's been proposed in that review from James Withers? And as this is the last question, this is also your opportunity to pitch any last points that you want to raise that maybe we haven't picked up on during the course of the session. So it's over to yourselves. I cannot believe there's silence with that pitch, but Tony will kick off. Tony.
So in terms of the Withers report, I think the main takeaway would be things need to be employer aligned, and if I relate something to employer aligned, similar to Jennifer, my company is involved with the Scottish Apprenticeship Advisory Board. 3 of us at ACS are involved at different levels: the Apprenticeship Approvals Group, the Advisory Board and Employer Engagement Group. And I think the Withers report, and I mentioned employer aligned, the Scottish Apprentice Advisory Board, and that is the only independent body which is available to promote apprenticeship programmes, talk about the quality, talk about the number, the provision. And it's important that whatever we take away from the Withers report, I think we should make sure that the membership of the SAB, all the different companies involved, we don't lose them, and we don't lose the experience that exists there with people who are volunteers who are trying to do their best to promote apprenticeships and ensure that it remains employer aligned, because without employers we won't actually have any apprenticeships. So that'd be my
just on that point. I mean, yeah. you won't be the first person that's highlighted actually how effective SAB is. And is it a concern from you that it seems to be being suggested that may not necessarily disappear, but there seems to be a kind of vacuum as to what exactly would replace it, and you may end up losing something that's actually, most people are saying, is actually quite effective?
Absolutely. I'm not impartial, I should add that. However, we need to make sure that there is a vehicle to promote apprenticeships and make sure that they are given parity with other forms of education. And what SAB allows is to have an industry voice to ensure that that happens.
Okay, that's helpful. Any final pitches at all that we've missed?
I would agree with Tony on that point in terms of SAB being that employer voice. It's also an apprenticeship voice and has that opportunity there to provide the voice of apprentices. It is an important system that's there to support. My only concern would be if it was to be wound down or to be changed. We're in a situation as employers where we are looking to fill all these roles and all these skills, and we need to move at pace. Is that change going to take us back? Is that going to be a detrimental effect to us as we transition into a system that we don't yet know? So there are huge concerns there about what that would look like. And, yes, I agree there are improvements that can be made or should be made. Is that the focus that we need to look at, improving the existing system?
Okay, so any other reflections on the Withers review at all?
I don't think anybody could disagree with the main point that it makes about alignment with employers. I think the current landscape is a bit fragmented. I think the SAB does a lot of good work and is an independent voice, is how I would put it. I think in overall terms, I would still emphasise the point that I made earlier about, and it relates somewhat to policy. You know, free university tuition in Scotland has been a great thing, but it has created unintended consequences with fewer people going into technical and vocational careers because that opportunity exists. And we have produced a lot of graduates who are not in graduate level jobs, whereas technical skilled jobs can produce high earning, high earning, high tax economy, which I think is where we want to head. So if there's a policy balance in terms of how that funding works, more funding going to apprenticeships and adult retraining would be a good thing.
Okay. And final word to yourself, Stevie.
Yeah, a couple of points on the move. I understand and probably accept the idea of simplifying the landscape, but the move to the Scottish Funding Council receiving the pot of money that gets distributed rather than SDS. The concern I would have, I guess, is around all the private providers. You know, the Scottish Funding Council has got good relationships with colleges. What does that relationship look like in terms of supporting private providers? It's a concern probably in my mind. And then the idea that, you know, the leadership, there's a lot in the report talking about leadership and Scottish Government taking the power and leading authority in it, and then devolving the decisions to local level to suit local needs. So just understanding that relationship, you know, how much autonomy will the local decision makers have, ensuring that the local needs are met with the local employers? That's really important.
Okay, that's great. Can I say a huge thank you to our panel this morning? That's the end of our evidence session, and I have to say I thought your insights were incredibly helpful to the committee. So thank you so much indeed for your time this morning, and I now suspend this meeting and move into private session.